Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consol, your host. Before we begin this episode, I want to alert you that my latest book is now available in both print and ebook formats. The title is Love American Style, and it is a collection of short stories about men, women, their passions, and their dysfunctions. There's a short link in the episode notes that will take you to my Amazon profile page, where all 4 of my books are listed, 3 novels in this new short story collection. Again, the title of the new one is Love American Style, named after the TV series that ran from 1969 until 1974. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is a hot new talent, Canadian author Deepa Rajagopalan. She was born in Saudi Arabia, moved to India as an adolescent, and later came to the United States and Canada in her 20s. She works in the tech industry in Toronto. She won the 2021 PEN Canadian New Voices Award for her short story, Peacocks of Instagram. She was just shortlisted for the Giller Prize. The Giller Prize is a literary award given to the Canadian author of a novel or short story collection published in English the previous year. And that book is the short story collection titled Peacocks of Instagram. Obviously, the short story itself, Peacocks of Instagram, is in that collection along with other stories. That book is now available on Amazon and every book-selling site imaginable these days. They show up everywhere now. But she's also working on her first novel now, which is titled We Have Come Empty-Handed, about a disparate group of Indian workers in Saudi Arabia whose lives become entangled, caught in the exigencies of war, deception, and intolerance. So much to look forward to. Deepa Rajagopalan, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mike. I'm happy to be here.
Let me begin with, let me just ask you about the tech industry for starters. Are you in biotech or are you in information technology?
Information technology.
It is. Okay. In what regard? Can you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, I work in tech consulting. So I work for a consulting company called Accenture. And my office is in
Accenture. Yeah.
Toronto. Yep.
Very famous company, Accenture, and your office is in Toronto. Okay, very, very
Yeah.
well. So you've got to be excited right now. It seems like there's a lot of excitement around you with this new book that's out. You've won a prize. You're shortlisted for another important prize. How just what you're experiencing right now is what so many writers work to achieve, and very few do. I don't know. You're so young still. So I hope you appreciate just what a great thing this is that's happening to you. What's been the experience from your standpoint?
Yeah, it's been incredible. I mean, it is my first book, so I don't have anything else to compare it with. But yeah, to get a Giller nomination for my book, especially a book that I don't think fits the quintessential CanLit mold. I think it's a deeply meaningful validation. I think it says like this too is Canadian literature now. Yeah, I'm overjoyed. I'm a little overwhelmed, but mostly overjoyed.
If I might ask, how old are you?
I just turned 40 this year.
You just
I'm
turned
not
40.
that young.
You look much younger than your age. I mean, 40 is young, yeah, by any measurement. Certainly to me, it's young, but you look much younger. That's quite amazing. How long have you been writing? How long ago did you decide you wanted to write fiction? And yeah, how long ago? How old were you when that came to you?
Um, I mean, I think I was always writing as a child. When I was 8 years old, it occurred to me that books had authors and that I could write one. And I started writing a novel that now that I think of it, it was heavily plagiarized from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I think it had a female protagonist though. But it was funny, those days I mostly read books written by, Western authors. So my protagonist was white. That no novel didn't go anywhere. But I was always writing something. I wrote for the school magazines. I sent stuff out to newspapers. I think when I was 12 or 13, I got a piece published in a newspaper back in India. And I also love to write letters, handwritten letters. I was that weird kid who wrote letters to her teachers during summer break
Oh,
to improve
wow.
my writing. And some of my teachers actually wrote back, which was quite delightful. But yeah, I think I was always writing. I when I started working in tech, I did kind of not I stopped writing as much. I was always reading, but after a few years, I really felt that lack of creative outlet took a toll on me. So I took a few years break. I really kind of focused on just going back to school. I took some courses at the University of Toronto. I did an MFA in creative writing from the University of Guelph. And this book was actually my thesis during my MFA. And then I really started sending my work out to magazines and started looking for agents. And, that's how this came about.
Was it Peacocks that was your thesis? Peacocks of Instagram?
Peacocks of Instagram. Yeah.
So where did this is one of those cases where here you wrote a short story that grabbed a lot of attention and won an award and then kind of opened the door for you to a short story collection. How many stories are in Peacocks?
There are 14 stories in the collection. Interestingly, the first story I wrote was Peacocks of Instagram. And that really gave me a guide for the rest of the book. And that this story was the one that won the PEN Canada New Voices Award. And it was a really great boost for me to keep going. And two other stories from this collection also won some prizes in Canadian literary magazines. One was in the New Quarterly, and another one was in the Malahat Review. And I think, these magazines really help you, keep going really and get that validation that you need, when you're in the middle of writing.
Hmm. So the background you have is very rich. I mean, when Saudi Arabia, India, Canada, the United States, um, it sounds. I don't know how much you draw off of your. I mean, if you're a typical author, you draw a lot off your personal experiences. How much do you
Mhm.
remember of Saudi Arabia?
I remember it pretty well. I was born there and I lived there um, mostly until I was 12. And that's when I moved to boarding school in India. So I remember it pretty well. I have many friends whom I'm still in touch with during, that I know from that time.
Now, did you obviously it's a very different culture in terms of women are
Hmm.
it's very
Hmm.
restrictive with women. Did your mom experience that in any significant way? Did you experience that, or were you treated maybe any differently because you're foreigners? Well, they're from a culture that's where there's more openness for women, and perhaps the strictures
Hmm.
weren't as tightly enforced.
No, not really. Like my mom, my parents, like all of us really experienced that. But my parents were, they were from families who weren't necessarily well off at the time. So this was a means for like upward mobility, like financial mobility, social mobility. So they never really complained. My parents and many people from that generation were the kind of people who could just make home anywhere. And I think I've kind of learned that from them as well. But yeah, it was very restricted. My mom had to wear the abaya. Um, I didn't have to because I was quite young when I left Saudi Arabia. But we did go to a Indian international school, and I was fortunate to have very good teachers. I had an incredible English teacher um, who I think was educated in the Oxford O levels or A level, something like that. But yeah, she was wonderful. She helped me see the beauty of literature, and I think there was a switch somewhere when I was, when she was teaching me when you're so young, you realize that someone wrote these beautiful sentences that you so admire, and maybe you can try to do something like that.
You mentioned that when you first started writing, you were writing basically white characters, or
Yeah.
Western, Caucasian characters. Did um, the you were mentioning Huck Finn, and I think that was a book you mentioned that you said you heavily
Mhm.
plagiarized when you were just a young girl. And
Yeah.
uh, was the today though, this is the point I'm getting
Hmm.
at. I kind of lost my train of thought there for a minute, but the point I'm getting at is that we've seen um, Indian people now making movies that are smash hits, writing more books that are getting a lot of attention. I mean, would you agree that Indian culture is starting to assert itself in North America in a way I probably have never seen before?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing up, when I was really young, I did read a lot of Western authors, and even into my high school years, Charles Dickens, Thomas Hardy, Hemingway, Raymond Carver, all of that. But then once I started reading more Indian authors, more racialized authors, like I really got into that, and I could see myself in many of those stories. I think Arundhati Roy, Murakami, Ishiguro, Toni Morrison, and more recently Chimamanda Adichie, Subankam Tamavangsa, who's one of my mentors here in Canada. Just reading all of their books, it really made me feel seen. And I think now there's a palette for that type of literature, for a different voice in North America, in books and TV, and even in comedy. Like there's a lot of new Indian comedians
I
up
see
and
some of
coming.
them. They're very
Yeah.
funny too. I mean, there's a lot of ethnic comedians now here in the
Hmm.
United States. A lot of Hispanic comedians that I see.
Hmm.
I see the Indian comedians. I've seen Middle Eastern, Persian or Arabic
Hmm.
comedians. It's one of the way, and it's also one of the ways I think that they are able to exploit their culture in a way that people enjoy. But also, I think overseas in countries that are more limiting about what can be said. Sometimes if you make a joke, you can actually get away with that, and you're getting the point across, but at the same time, entertaining people, and it's not such a threat to the authorities.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so, so here you are. You start to see yourself in books. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, here's a light bulb moment, and
Hmm.
um, so you see new possibilities. And
Right.
what was the turning point in your writing career, would you say? I heard you say that you had a mentor. Was there at any, was it actually reading one particular book where it was like, wow, this is like an epiphany that I can write about my own culture and my own,
Hmm.
my own situation?
Yeah, I think that book would be The God of Small Things, even though I did read it when I was much younger, around the time it came out, and The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. But I read it, many years after that, and I think that really uh, showed me the possibilities of language, because that book is set in Kerala, which is where I'm from in India. And I really felt represented not just in the characters, but also the voice, the humor, and the irreverence, of like traditional structure and form, even words. I really thought that, this is something that I would like to do. That's one book. I don't really reread many books, but that's one book I've reread
Yeah,
multiple
I'm with
times.
you. I'm with you. I don't reread many, but if I do, I know that it really struck a chord with me.
Yeah.
Um, Talk about peacocks of Instagram. Give a summary of the story for our listeners, and maybe talk a little bit about where the idea came from.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I think I was kind of disillusioned by how racialized characters were typically represented in literature originating from the West, right? It's great that now there's more voices being seen. We talked about even comedy, but I did find that a lot of that it's kind of catering to a Western gaze, right? There were too many stereotypes, broad strokes, and kind of almost exclusive trauma narratives, and the lack of humor or creativity in some of these characters. So I wanted to center people, who have more agency, even though it's not necessarily given to them in the traditional sense. I wanted to center characters who are funny and self-aware, um, and creative and enterprising, like a lot of people I know in real life. In my book, Peacocks of Instagram, there's a Malayali coffee store employee in Canada who also sells peacock accessories on the internet. Um, there's a foster child who there's an Indian foster child who brings down her foster father, an oil lobbyist, um, in a very interesting turn of events. There's a woman who was educated to be a medical doctor, but who turns to pottery during a difficult time in her life. So I really wanted to center characters who you don't necessarily get to see in fiction, who have like rich, who seem ordinary, but have like really rich lives.
So the you talk during this story, and this is one of the reasons I asked you about whether you were in information technology or biotech, because you talk about the
Mm-hmm.
feathers of the peacock and
Mm-hmm.
the crystals. Am I remembering this right? There's
Mm-hmm.
crystals
Yeah,
contained within them that
yeah.
actually give them their
Mm-hmm.
vivid colors.
Right.
Um, first of all, that's kind of what I made me think,
Mm-hmm.
well, it didn't specify in text. So I thought maybe you were in the biotech field, but then it also occurs to me that with peacocks, it's actually the male who's a really colorful one.
Yeah.
Does that come into did that come into play in your thinking at all? I mean, or did at any point was that something that you felt like was a point to be made of any certain way? Or and when I say point to be made, I don't mean an explicit one, but for
Mm-hmm.
example, just kind of a serves as an entendre or a maybe just a something thematic.
I wish I had thought of something like that. But but the crystals and the pigments that really just came from research. Like I watched a couple of documentaries on peacocks and mating. I was just so interested in this idea that the male is um, the prettier species, uh, in the traditional sense, and how they kind of have to fight for attention from females despite being pretty. So I think I just was really interested in that idea. And I wanted to kind of find a way to weave that into a story. And like peacocks, like saw a lot of peacocks in India growing up, like in temples and stuff. And at the time, I just thought they were so weird. Especially when you're a child, and like they're beautiful, but they're also so weird and so big, and just they're kind of there feels like their center of gravity can't be right. Like they're just so big. But yeah, I really just wanted to find a way to weave them into the story. And when I was thinking of peacocking, I was also thinking of that idea of like just kind of presenting yourself in a way. There's a couple of stories that uh, kind of have social media references or have characters who sell things on social media. And I think that's so interesting, especially for my generation where we didn't grow up on social media, but now it's like we're all on it and doing really interesting things, with it. So, and I think a lot of us have found a way to kind of have a persona on social media that's different from who we really are, but also, know that, you need that, that's necessary in a certain way.
Yeah, kind of an alter ego can be
Yeah.
created.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now you're working on your novel, and
Mm-hmm.
you're, employed by Accenture. That's got to be a busy job. So I'm curious what your writing routine is each day. Are you a morning writer? Do you write in the evening?
Hmm.
Is it just catch as catch can? Talk a little bit about how you get things done.
Yeah, I am really busy, so I have to kind of really organize my days. So I do wake up quite early in the morning. I wake up between 4 and 5 in the morning. I write for a couple of hours, and then I get my daughter ready for school. Um, and yeah, and sometimes I also kind of work uh, on some edits, or if I have anything writing adjacent that I want to do or that I need to do in the evenings. But like weekends, I spend a lot of time writing. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my routine. I try to have word count, uh, you know, uh, word count goals for every day. Or more like, every 10 days, I have a word count goal. And I kind of outline. Right now, I'm working on the novel, so I've kind of outlined it, a number of pages I want to write. Every 10 to 15 days, and I try to stick to it. It's been kind of busy last couple of months, so I am a bit behind, but I try my best to
So
stick
what
to
would your
a
word count
schedule.
goal be daily? You're saying a month. If you average it out, do you how many words a day roughly would you say you're targeting? I know there's some very
Um,
famous writers who they would be like a 500 words a day or 1,000 words a day, and
Yeah, I
they
don't think I'm that much, but I try not to do a daily goal because that can be kind of, sometimes I don't meet it and then I don't want to get discouraged. So I make goals for like, say, a week or 2 weeks. So I usually have like, 10 to 15 pages every kind of 10 days,
ten
that.
10 to 15 every 10 days. Okay, and
Mhm,
these are
yeah.
fairly polished pages, I would imagine.
Not really. I mean, well, that's the thing. It's so different to write a novel than a short story. When I was writing the short story, I could write a first draft in like a couple of weeks, and then, I just kind of spent a lot of time polishing it. But for the novel, I was starting to do that. I write a chapter, polish it, and then it wasn't going anywhere because, I go to the next chapter and I'm gonna have to. I had to change what was going on in the first chapter. So now I'm just writing the whole first draft. So I don't think it's really polished. I'm forcing myself to keep going and not go and polish them because I want that first draft on page.
Hmm. So, what obsesses you, Deepa? Maybe obsesses is too strong a word. What dominates your attention, other than your daughter, of course, your daughter in your job? When it's not your daughter, not your job, is there something that you think is going to be reflected? It has been reflected in your writing and will be reflected in your writing over time because it's something that's really central to your thinking.
Yeah, I think. Um, I mean, I'm generally obsessed by people, um, and like just experiences that are kind of away from the expected, or away from what you would expect from a certain person, or just yeah, experiences and people who are different from what the roles that they're supposed to play. um so I think I do see that in my stories. um but yeah, in general, like outside of writing, I do have a lot of interests. I, I always like joke with my daughter, if I had, like 48 hours in a day, I could do all the things that I wanted to do. Because I'm just really interested in a lot of things. Um, I'm really interested in pottery, though I'm really bad at it, and my pieces are really dreadful. But I just love it so much that I keep doing it. I just
What do
love
you
the
get
idea
out
that.
of it? I'm curious about this because I know most people, I shouldn't say most people, I
Mhm.
know with me and a lot of people, if I'm not good at something, it's hard for me to enjoy it. And obviously, you have to stick with
Mhm.
something long enough to get good at it. So obviously, even though you're saying that the pottery is not good, there's something about working with it that satisfies something in you. Are you a real tactful person? Tactile, I think it came out tactile person, where you the actual feel of it in your hands is something that is
Um,
is
no,
something
I
that brings you back.
no, I really like to do things I'm not good at. I think it just makes me feel like there's so much opportunity to grow, and I just love being in that stage where it's new when I'm a beginner and I'm a student, and I just have
So
so much to
you're a
learn.
beginner right now with that, and
Um,
you're seeing
yeah,
progress.
well, not really, but I still like it.
You probably can't devote enough time to it right now to get some
Yeah,
proficiency at it, huh?
yeah, and I'm trying to do things, that I will probably always be mediocre at, but I just enjoy it. Like I'm learning to sing. I've always wanted to sing as a child, but never had the opportunity to learn. And now my daughter's learning, and I'm learning too. And yeah, I'm mediocre at it, but I just love learning new things. I've done a lot of things like that. I've learned yoga, and I've taught yoga. Completely just because I was interested in it. So yeah, I really like to be in that space when I'm new, and just having that opportunity to learn.
You're the first person I've ever heard say, I really like to do things I'm not good at. Now, I like to learn. I'm interested in a lot of things I like to learn, which is what you said. And obviously, you have to start something. Everybody's, inadequate at what they're doing when they first start. But I get what you're saying, that actually developing a skill over
Mhm.
time, that's a great thing. Much like you did with writing. I mean, when you first started, obviously, um, we're all quite ham-fisted
Mhm.
with the writing until we get some real experience and start imitating some good writers, or understanding
Right.
how
Hmm.
to emulate good writing and so on. Um, Interesting. So the novel that you're working on now, again, I said it
Hmm.
at the top, we have come empty-handed. This takes you back to Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
And you're talking about war and deception and intolerance. What can you tell us about the novel beyond that? Or maybe you don't
Hmm.
want to, but I'm just asking, what can you say about it at this stage? But
Yeah.
let me first ask, how far along are you? You're just getting started, or are you halfway through? Or are you just, I
Um,
thought I heard you say you're outlining it at this stage.
no, I've outlined it. Well, the thing is, I started writing. I wrote like about 100 pages earlier, and then I realized I wasn't liking the perspective and the point of view I was telling it from. So I scratched it and I re-outlined it, and now I'm doing it again. I did manage to save pieces of the earlier version that will fit in here. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can tell you a little bit about what I think it is now, but I'm sure it'll evolve as I continue to write. The novel follows the lives of three characters, like you mentioned. There's a home daycare teacher, a tailor, and a young girl who live in Saudi Arabia. And their lives are intertwined because of a tragedy that happens during the first Gulf War in 1990-91. And the tragedy has little to do with the war itself, but this kind of their lives are intertwined because of that. And the novel kind of takes place over a span of 3 decades and moves from Saudi Arabia to India to the US. And it starts at that point in history in 1990-91 when the world was becoming a unipolar world. So I was really interested to explore an intimate story in that political climate. And I like to kind of tell the story from a place of memory, so someone looking back. And the three perspectives are told from, I mean, the three characters' perspectives are told from different perspectives. So there's the first person, the child's voice, and then there's third person close, which is the tailor's voice, and then the daycare teacher's perspective is more from a third person omniscient, because I really wanted to play with all of those voices to make the reader really understand what the setting was, and also be able to get to the interiority of some of the main characters. Um, and because it goes from Saudi Arabia to India to the US, I get asked if it is my story, but it's not. I do write what I know. So these places are familiar to me, and that's why it's set in these places.
Yes, yes. So, talk about your state of mind when you're writing. Is there a certain attitude you bring to the chore? I call it a chore, to the practice, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Stephen King's book on writing. He said, when you sit down to
Mm-hmm.
write, you have to do it with an attitude, and whatever
Mm-hmm.
that attitude might be. When you sit down to write, what's kind of your state of mind or attitude? Is there something consistent each day? Do you try to bring a certain mindset to your practice?
Um, yeah, I think I was trying to remember where I read this. It's one of the on writing books. It wasn't the Stephen King one, but someone said, I can't remember who said it, but they were asked, oh, I only write when inspiration strikes, but inspiration strikes every morning at 9 a.m. So I just try to, it's a job and it's something that I have to do because I want to do it. And I just kind of sit down and, not make excuses and just get at it. I think when I'm writing the first draft of something, I'm quite uneasy, until I kind of see the bones of the story. But once it starts to flow, um, it's so fun and it's so wonderful, right? So there are good writing days and bad writing days, but yeah, I think I just go with that attitude, like this is something I have to do. I'm not trying to see if I'm enjoying it in the moment or not. I just need to do this. I put my phone away and I sit down and write.
I have very workmanlike attitude. It's just
Yeah.
okay. Um, is there anything you do to prep for your writing that day? Well, you're up very early. I know you're a yoga
Hmm.
practitioner. You had mentioned that. Do you do breath of fire before you write? Do you do any kind of meditation before you write? Is there anything ritualistic before you write, or is it just a
Um,
matter of sitting down and doing it?
yeah, no, actually, in fact, I do writing before I meditate. So I wake up and I make my coffee and I sit down. There's a chair in my living room where I sit down and I just get to it. I usually read a few pages of, a book that I, feel like is kind of in the space of what I'm working on. So I read a few pages to kind of get in the mood and then I start to write.
So, what characteristic do you have that you think is the most important to being successful with the writing?
I think I'm just very determined. When I want to do something, I just kind of chase it with almost utmost focus. My mom calls it stubborn, but I think I'm just determined.
Either one will probably work, so that's good. Now, you had mentioned you weren't happy with the perspective or the point of view in the first outline of the novel you're working on
Hmm.
right now. So you decided to do a fresh outline. When
Hmm.
you talk about that, does it have to do with whether it's written in first or second or third person, or was there something else at play there? Will it be a first person story, or will it be third person, or?
Yeah, so I think that's so. First, when I was writing it, I wrote it from a first person narrative, from the point of view of the child, which was really the child, yeah, from the point of view of the child, and it was kind of set um, in the time that it was happening. And I think it was even written in the present tense, which was great for action. It was great for, getting into the interiority of the child. But it wasn't really working for the story because I wanted to tell, a story with a kind of much larger, um, kind of in a larger time frame. Um, and I really also wanted to have more kind of omniscient perspectives now and then so that the reader gets a sense of the time and place the story is set in. So then I decided to write it from the three characters' point of view, and it's a different perspective. So the first, most of it is still in the first person point of view, but it's from a place of memory. So it's a adult looking back to when she was a child. And then there's also a third person omniscient perspective, where one of the characters' kind of chapters come out. And then there's another character whose stories are more third person close, but they have a very unique voice. And I'm trying to have that voice come out, not just in like dialogue, but also, through the text, that unusual kind of quirky person they are. So yeah, I really wanted to make sure that unlike a short story where you kind of go in and out and everything is so crisp, here you have that opportunity to meander and to show different facets of a character and kind of just go down little rabbit holes. So I think that's why I thought that this shift in perspective will be good for the book.
Mm. I remember a critic who said Elmore Leonard, the great detective novelist, writes dialogue like he invented it. What aspect of your writing game do you consider your greatest strength? Is it dialogue or description? Is it character development, pacing? What would you say is really kind of your superpower as a writer, if you were to pick one of the ways you express your writing?
I think it would be probably character development. And also just I like to have really unusual turns in short stories, and now also in my novel, like something you don't expect. Not necessarily withholding something from the reader, but it's just kind of said in a different way, through language, or even through plot. Yeah, I mean it's hard to say. Really, kind of whatever you need for that story. But I think I really think of characters first when I think of the story before I think of the plot. So I have an arc for the character in my mind when I get started.
Now, are you one of those people who attended book conferences, writers' conferences and book expos and all that? Did you attend those? Was that part of the way you pursued your career?
Yeah, a few of them. I think I did. I attended mostly in Canada though. In the US, I think I attended a Writers Digest conference, but mostly like literary festivals and conferences in Canada. For the last, I would say 6, 7 years, I've been going to literary festivals often. And this year, for the first time, like I got to go with my book. The Toronto International Festival of Authors. That was great. Um, Eden Mills, Wild Writers. There was a festival in Halifax called Afterwards that I'm excited about in November. But yeah, I think it's wonderful to meet people and to be in that community of writers. And that's one of the reasons I did my MFA. In addition to obviously wanting to improve my craft, I really wanted that community because being working in a completely different field, I didn't really have a writing community. And that's one of the ways you feel like a writer, when you're in the company of other writers,
Yes.
because it's such a solitary job.
Um, do, Speaking of that, well, I guess you do all your writing at home because you get up really early and you have a daughter and all that. Some people will go places like to go to a coffee house or what have you. Do you ever, on weekends, do you ever go somewhere other than home to do your writing? Is there any place that's stimulative to you?
Yeah, I do write all, like, because I'm so busy, I can write anywhere really. I I usually work from home, but once a week I go to the office in Toronto. I live an hour outside of Toronto, and I write on the train. I did take some time off during my MFA, and I wrote from coffee shops a lot. Um, I edited a lot of my book, this book, from a coffee shop near my house. Yeah, I think I've written on in hotel rooms and train, subway, everywhere. As
Airplanes.
long as I have my laptop. Airplanes, yeah.
Yeah, this is a good solitude on an airplane, good quiet
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
Getting back to the conferences for a minute, back early on, did you find the conferences to be helpful? That did you feel like they were a chance to advance your career? In what ways did the conferences assist?
I think it was mostly to kind of figure out publishing because I find writing and publishing can be so different. And like the what you have to do to write and what you have to do to get published and promote your book, there can be quite different. So I think that's mostly what the conferences kind of helped in helping me understand how to find an agent, like what are agents looking for, just kind of to see perspectives of the agent. So when you're querying, it helps you kind of structure the query in a way that's advantageous for you. Um, yeah, and publishing too, right? Like publishing, traditional publishing is quite challenging now, and how to navigate that. I think those are some of the things I try to take away from conferences.
When you look to the future, Deepa, um, do you consider yourself, well, let me put it this way, um, 20, 25, 30 years from now, what, or even in the present for that matter, if somebody asks you what's your subject matter, what is it that you write about? Do you have one thing or some kind of theme that you think will be the thing that you are writing about and will write about into the future? Or do you feel like you'll be hopping from subjects to subjects and kind of themes to themes?
Yeah, I think I'm really interested in power, writing about power, who has it, who doesn't, and what do people do when they don't have it. I think those themes will kind of always exist. Um, I'm really interested in literary fiction. That's what I read, and that's what I want to write. Um, and it's interesting because I did, when I wanted to get back to writing, I did think I wanted to write nonfiction, and I started writing nonfiction, and I realized that I just couldn't be truthful, especially if it was, something personal. So I feel like, the reason I write is so that I can tell the truth, and fiction gives me the freedom to do that, and really kind of, write. I write so that I can kind of look at everything again, slowly. There's that quote by Zadie Smith. I think it says something like, "The very reason I write is so that I don't sleepwalk through my entire life." So I feel I really resonate with that. Like even though I write fiction, feelings are universal, and I think getting to the truth of human beings, that's what I want to do. I know this is kind of a very broad answer, but I really don't want to kind of limit myself to specific themes. But I think these are some of the things I'm interested in.
Sure. Well, you don't want to be a genre writer. You
Yeah.
want to do literature and you want it and its power and those who maybe are disenfranchised, people who don't have
Mhm.
power or the
Yeah.
victims of those who have the power. Yeah, I mean that's a very universal theme. So
Mhm.
I think many people can relate to that. Um, this is a speculative question, but I'm just wondering just how you think your writing will change or evolve over time. I mean, you've had time to see yourself from a very early age starting to write, and you see how your writing has evolved. As you look down the road, maybe 20 years, do you have any sense of how your writing will evolve?
I hope that it will continue to get better. I hope I would have written many more books by then. Um, I, like I really like to be in a place where I can continue to grow. So I think that's, and writing is a field where I think every time you start a new story or a new book, it's just so difficult again. You feel like you've never done this before. So I think that really satisfies my curiosities, and I hope it continues to get better. I hope I publish many books and get published in many great magazines.
Well, I wish you luck. We all wish you luck. This is exciting, as I said, the progress you've made, and with the awards that you're shortlisted for have won, and this new novel you've got that you're working on. Deep, I wish you best of luck, and I thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this discussion.